The West Wing did a show once and it was called Take Out the Trash Day. Where did you bury bad news? Well, the equivalent has happened today with British women's rowing. Take Out the Trash Day happened with a couple of lines at the end of the British press release entitled Four gold medal crews remain the same. Of course, the big news was not at the top line of that press release that the European gold medal crews will remain the same for Lucerne, but it was right at the end. It was that the performance of the Open Women's Double of Granger and Thornley has been reviewed, and after Lucerne, they will be given the chance to be considered for the women's eight. Now, clearly, that's a very strange announcement in the middle of Olympic season, particularly from the British team, where you think you've got everything taped and ready and almost there at Rio, the last sort of 200 metres in a 2,000 metre race analogy over 4 years. So, what is going on? The simple answer is that we don't know, but there are several things that we do know. First of all, that the double between Granger and Thornley was not necessarily a natural double. So when they first started off, Catherine Granger was in the stroke seat. Vicky Thornley found it difficult to follow Kath, and so they swapped around for the Worlds, and Kath Granger went in the bow seat and Thornley in the stroke seat, so Granger could follow Thornley. It was a better double. To be quite honest, I thought they had a decent season last year. They were in contention for the medals with about 500 metres to go in the Worlds. They just ran out of pace, but you know, you'd thought Granger will be fitter this year. She'll come back into it, so the double will be quite a good bet. But clearly other stuff had gone on. Anna Watkins came back in. Now, Anna announced the fact that she was coming back in just a week before the World Championships. I know from what people have said, and you can probably guess that that had an unsettling effect on the double between Thornley and Granger. And quite clearly, Vicky Thornley, when the sort of 2016 season progressed, wanted to show that she was the fastest single sculler and show she was right up there to be in contention for the women's double. I guess fond thoughts turned to maybe Catherine Granger and Anna Watkins sort of doing a reprise of their Olympic women's double scull gold medal performance of 2012. Certainly, I think that was in the mind of Catherine Granger. Maybe give the double a chance and they'll be sort of okay in the end. Of course, the two women never really got that chance, very sadly, and I don't know the reason why. I guess it was in part to do with performance under pressure from Anna Watkins, the difficulty of running a family, two small kids, and trying to compete in the Olympics at the same time. And Anna Watkins dropped out. I'm guessing, but I would imagine that there was an after effect of that, specifically an after effect on the relationship between Granger and Thornley. And I would imagine that made things very difficult. It wasn't long after that that Mel Wilson, who was the fourth woman in that sort of group of four to make a British women's double scull, switched from sculling to rowing and then went into the British women's eight. It's not too difficult to imagine that perhaps the chemistry between Granger and Thornley wasn't particularly great. Vicky Thornley, is the fastest sculler, was really looking at her medal options, very ambitious. Will I get a medal in this double with this woman, Catherine Granger, or will I be better off in the women's eight with a lot of hard-working women? You know, they weren't so far off a medal in 2015. So it's not too hard to imagine that Vicky Thornley aspirationally was seeing the eight as a higher medal boat than the double. The women's double or doubles are very interesting boats to put together. I was with Iztok Chop last weekend at the Europeans, and of course the double between Iztok Chop, which won Olympic gold in Sydney in 2000, and Lukas Spick. You know, Chop didn't really want to row with Spick. He didn't really get on with him that well. He was very frustrated by him. I think that worked with Spick and Chop. But really, they were the two best guys in Slovenia. There weren't any other options, and the two of them found themselves together. Clearly, in this case, that there is another option, and the announcement that the women will go into the eight or be considered for the eight is not something that just is dependent on that result in Brandenburg. Clearly, we don't know the internal squad testings, but the double will have been up against pieces with the women's pair, the men's single, in head-to-heads over 1K, 2K pieces, and the coaches and crucially the two women. And I'm guessing really, I don't know whether Thornley is the driver in this or Granger is the driver, but been making some estimation of their speed. My sense is the Europeans would have been some kind of trial that let's see how the double goes at the Europeans and then make a decision whether you're going to go into the 8. If you looked at the first heat of the Europeans, Granger and Thornley, I thought they sculled really well. I thought they beat the Greek silver medalists, who admittedly weren't going well, but they won the heat, they beat the Czechs, and they went straight to the final. And I looked at it, I was a little bit surprised because I knew there'd been a bit of sort of tension and friction below the surface, but I thought decent performance. The final clearly wasn't. And in those rough conditions, one might be tempted to write that off. Certainly the British men's 8 had an experience that was similar. You know, they didn't have such a good row. But I think really, possibly there had been some kind of arrangement, agreement beforehand. I don't know now. I'm supposing that let's see what it's like in the Europeans. And that was last chance salute in effect for the women's double. I think it aspirationally shows that the British women are aiming very high. They are hungry for Olympic medals, and perhaps Vicky Thornley sees that British women's 8 is the vehicle for her and presumably Kath Granger to get a medal, and the women's double isn't. It is sad. It is interesting. It's so close to the qualification regatta, of course, so it leaves the women's double slot open. I guess if the British women's quad don't qualify at the qualification regatta in 10 days or so's time, some of those young women will have the option to go into the double scull. I guess also if Granger and Thornley, and I would imagine that both of them will get into the British women's 8, then two women in the British women's 8 will have to come out and do the double scull. It's very difficult to see who that might be, but I guess Mel Wilson and Fran Horton, two great scullers, would be obvious to come out into the British women's double. But clearly the selection for the British women's 8 has been a real cutthroat process. And I guess the 8 women, after their performance in Brandenburg where they won gold, must have been very pleased. Now, of course, they'll be looking over their shoulder, but it is cutthroat in the Olympics, and medals don't come easy. And here's an example. British rowing wouldn't have wanted it to be like this. Certainly, you can see that Take Out the Trash Day on this Sunday in May has been a big thing for British rowing. Let's hope they get over it. Let's hope the results come back. Let's hope that Thornley and Granger and the rest of the team get what they want.